There you go.
For the benefit of everybody in the room, I'm going to go ahead and talk through some prepared questions that we have, and then towards the end, we'll leave about 5 to 10 minutes for Q&A from the crowd. I'll go ahead and call on you, and you can ask your question. But I think a good place to start is your background. We heard a little bit about it. I think it's tempting as a student when we see someone with such an accomplished background as yourself to kind of think it was just a direct linear path to the top. So with that in mind, can you talk about some of the key turning points in your career and maybe some of the decisions you made along the way that may have changed your trajectory in any way?
Yeah, well, my career, I would say, is definitely not a straight line. I think, when I started out, I really focused in, when I left Carnegie Mellon, I really focused in on, what's an industry in which I think I can be challenged and I think has a lot of change and it's dynamic. And so part of why I joined IBM was because of its presence and the role it plays in the technology industry. Secondly, I also knew that I wanted something that was global. I worked prior to Carnegie Mellon, I worked in a bank, kind of a mid-sized bank back in the mid-'80s, and I knew at the time part of the reason to come to Carnegie Mellon was to make that leap from sort of regional to a global scale operation. So my reasons for choosing IBM initially all still exist today. The role we play in the technology industry has evolved, but I still love the technology industry. And obviously we're still global, we still have scale, and we operate in 172 countries. So the reasons to start at IBM are consistent with part of why I stay today. What I've really appreciated about IBM, as I've learned over the years, are a few things. One, the ability of the organization to evolve. I mean, we're 108 years old, and what I remember from what we did and how we did it, and obviously some of the people are the same, but everything has evolved, and it's a dynamic industry that requires dynamic organizations. Now, that doesn't mean that we feel like we have to invent everything new. I mean, we run the banking systems of the world and the supply chains of the world and the reservation systems of the world. So that the nature of that role means you have to evolve, but you also have to evolve at a pace that are important to clients. So again, I love the industry. I like the scale. What I've come to appreciate is this ability to constantly evolve and transform ourselves. And then the other thing that I really like are the people. The depth of talent that IBM has across many spectrum in research and development, in marketing, in finance, enormously talented group of people. So as you're navigating something like that, with that as a basis, I like what I do, I like the organization in which I do it, and I like the people with whom I do it. Now all of a sudden, when you get to, as you said, some of the critical choices, they don't seem so daunting, quite frankly. And for me, I was interested in, because of my ambition, I was interested in always making sure I was going up as high as I could. So I missed a few things along the way. There are a lot of jobs I didn't have, obviously. Although when you read them off, it was making me tired thinking about some of those jobs. There were a lot of jobs I didn't have along the way, but within that decision matrix of all the things that I liked about it, I didn't really feel like I could go wrong if I picked a path, and my path was always up as opposed to sideways, knowing that I would miss things along the way, and then making sure that I was doing the important things. Well, one, being successful, obviously, in the role. You have to be successful in your roles. But doing the important things around learning and expanding my style, particularly as I got into management, creating a management style that was going to give me a group of people who actually wanted to work for me. I mean, it's one thing to come out of Carnegie Mellon as a great analyst. I'm not saying I was a great analyst coming out of Carnegie Mellon, but I was an okay analyst coming out of Carnegie Mellon. So it's one thing to be a great analyst. It's really hard then when you start to look around and say, okay, how am I going to get people who are going to do the job I'm doing, right? Most of us we play a really important role in a machine, in an organization, and now you got to start to figure out, okay, well, if I do that, who's going to do this, right? So So the decisions, the important decisions were about again, once my path was clear, I wanted to make sure I kept going up. Then the decisions were more about who am I going to bring with me? How am I going to create a relationship with different people? Much more relationship oriented than I would have thought in the beginning. And even in my old bank, which again it's like 3 or 4 years, much smaller. So your ability to operate at that scale is much different than it is in a 350,000 person organization. So my learning has always been that it's these. How do you build relationships with people at a scale that's really going to allow you to keep moving through an organization?
Got it. So maybe a follow-up on decisions. I think we've all heard of the 80-20 rule, the idea that 20% of what we spend our time on will eventually account for 80% of the results that we see. I'm wondering if there's ever been a decision or set of decisions that you've made that have had sort of an outsized impact on your career in life.
Look, I've been very fortunate, I think. I mean, none of us should. Maybe there's an 80-20 rule. I will tell you that the 80-20 rule is like there's a lot of luck in a lot of this as well, right? So you got to be, when you get your chance at the bat, and not everyone gets a chance at the bat. I did get a chance to swing the bat. When you get the chance to swing the bat, you actually have to hit the ball, right? So the reason I say that is because each of us makes a decision really to do or not do 3 things. 1, how much am I actually going to prepare for whatever I happen to be doing? And the preparation process is so important in how you get ready for it. Doesn't matter what if I go to see a client, we spend a lot of time preparing to understand the client so that I can bring some value to the client. But how you choose to prepare for every day is such an important part of where you're ultimately going to wind up. Notwithstanding, yes, you need some luck when you get your shot at the bat. How you choose then to practice, right? Because reading something in a book or reading a fact sheet isn't going to really get you there. You really do need to interact with people and figure out how am I actually going to swing the bat. You can look. I can watch a YouTube video about how to dunk a basketball. I can read a book about how to dunk. I can even describe to you how to dunk a basketball. But there's not any amount of practice that's going to allow me to dunk a basketball. But if you practice what the things we do and you can put them to work, you're much better off. And then I think what's really important that maybe I didn't realize when I left Carnegie Mellon, the idea that learning is continuous is sort of a critical part of all of this process. In fact, the skills you have, you're going to leave with a set of skills and they're going to serve you quite well. But the half-life of all skills today is fairly short. It's certainly a lot shorter than a career. And I don't know if you're planning to work for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. I would argue that whatever skills you have are going to need to be refreshed. So everybody needs, I have this desire to learn, this desire to sort of stay contemporary in your skill base and stay contemporary in your thinking. So are there decisions we make? It's not a decision like, had I not taken that job, I wouldn't have won. I don't think about it that way. I think about it as, how do I make sure in an environment where there are probably a bunch of other people who want to do the same job you do, or a bunch of other people who want the job you have, how you prepare, how you rehearse, and how you learn continuously is really the kind of the critical decision that each of us can own, right? There's no outside influence. You are the master of your own destiny on those 3 decisions. And I would argue that those are the 3 that, when you do get a swing at the bat, are going to allow you to hit the ball.
So you talk about the importance of continuous learning, obviously. What specifically then are you doing right now in your life to kind of ensure that you're continuing to develop and grow as a leader?
So well, 2 things. So one, as a leader, I've spent some time with an ex-CEO who is a coach now to me, and I've learned a great deal about a leadership style that includes things like how do you engage in a Socratic questioning discussion with a group? How do you bring people into a discussion? These all seem like sort of simple things to say, but they actually do, again, you need to practice. And if you're going to get people to follow you, you need to lead them in a very positive way. So while, when I ran services business in Asia, it's 60,000 people, right? In that job, I learned that you have to communicate using superlatives. You have to say, we are always doing this. We are never doing this. You learn communication skills. Now I'm learning, how do I build greater followership at a level that I operate at today? So part of this is, How do you build leadership skills and interaction skills so that you can lead people at the right level? The other part of it is, the world is becoming more technical. That's true. That's true not only for the people who are out selling IBM technology, but it's for people like me as well. So when I go out to see a client, they want to know, tell me about OpenShift. Why is RHEL the best Linux platform? So I've spent a few hours now over the last few weekends just making sure I'm like 8 or 9 questions deep on RHEL, making sure I know why OpenShift is the best container platform, understanding the Red Hat business model, to make sure I can really explain it clearly and crisply to clients. So there's a leadership element to continuous learning, and that's like an evolution. And then there is a constant set of new technologies that are coming out. But don't ask me about quantum. I'm not quite there yet. But there's a constant, and nobody asked me about quantum, so it's okay. I have a little bit of time. But there's a constant set of sort of technical, deep technical things that that the world is interacting on that you need to be part of the conversation. People expect leadership to understand these parts of the business. You can't just sort of float above it all and say, "Oh, I got people. Please explain OpenShift."
So that's a perfect segue, because I'd like to switch gears here and talk a little bit about the industry and IBM specifically. So IBM's been in business for over a century now. I know you haven't been there that long.
Thank you.
As a leader, how do you continue to innovate and deliver value to clients in an industry that's really characterized by so much change?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, but it's an interesting industry. So we have always sat at sort of the intersection of what I'll call business and technology, right? So we don't feel like we have to invent every new bright shiny object, but there are a lot of bright shiny objects in our industry. We also don't feel like we have to just deploy our stuff into our clients. So when you look at the principles by which IBM operates, one of them is this really simple idea of dedication to every client's success, which means that you have to, in an organization of 350,000 people, you have to be able to get really comfortable that, I'm going to bring in, obviously, the technology I think is best, even if it's not ours. Right now, I think we've got great technology in lots of places, but there's no way we or any one company can invent everything that a client may need to run again the most important systems of the world. So in an industry that moves really fast with lots of bright shiny objects, what IBM continues to do is stay dedicated to their clients, which means we're really comfortable telling them and getting things to work that may not be ours. That's a big part of it. Now, at the same time, we do recognize we have to invent the future. Right, we have our 51-bit quantum computer is available for use on the cloud. I couldn't use it today, but people can use it today. And quantum is very much about what's next, right? So we spend a lot of time in our research division, world-renowned research, on not only what's next, and so let's say blockchain goes into that what's next category, but what's next, and I put quantum into that. So the way that we've always operated, again, is yes, it's a real focus on clients and what they need and how do you actually make things work, but it's also a focus on inventing the next thing, inventing the world of the future. Now, we're very fortunate because out of the top 5, 6, 7 reasons people join IBM, there's one that has been consistent. They don't tend to move around a ton, but there's one that's been consistent over many, many years, as long as I've been in IBM, and that is the nature of the work we do. People want to make a difference. It's more true in this generation, the generation that's coming into the workforce than it was ever before. The nature of the work, the desire to change the world for the better is so important to people and how they spend their time. I mean, we're very fortunate because the nature of the work we do allows them to work on creating a better future in so many different areas. Now, we also recognize that there's a huge responsibility to inventing the future and to creating the future, and that is you got to usher these things, these technologies in with a lot of responsibility. You can't just unleash quantum on the world, as an example, without unleashing the technologies that are going to protect it from decrypting every bit of encryption on the planet today. That would be a really bad day. You can't just unleash AI in the world without creating an AI lifecycle management, without creating a set of principles by which you're willing to deploy that AI. So the nature of the work is a huge advantage in helping us attract the best talent. helping us invent the future, and then a focus on how clients are actually going to use this, make the idea of this constant evolution, constant change, constant transformation a big part of the appeal for me.
Yeah. Speaking of these technologies, do you have any advice for us on how we should think about technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, impacting future jobs? Do you see it as more enabling or displacing factor?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll give you my opinion, and IBM's opinion is very clear that AI will change every job, but we're not in the AI business, if you will, to try to figure out how to displace jobs. That's really not how we see its best and highest use. We see the use of AI best today as sort of a man and machine, person and machine, man and woman and machine, however you want to think about it. That is how we see the highest and best use of this technology. Again, ushered in a way that recognizes the importance of privacy and data, and who owns the data and who owns the insights and all those things. But I can tell you that in my job, this job, in my prior CFO job, each of those has already changed in reasonably short periods. It was only 4 years I was CFO, but the job when I started and the job when I finished were evolving rapidly because of the use of AI. It wasn't because we were putting AI in and displacing a bunch of people. It was because we were using AI to elevate the talent of the group we had, so that all of a sudden, the access to insight is much more harmonized across a big pool of people. So when you think, for instance, about how we use AI in healthcare, and I don't remember exactly the data, but the number of cancer doctors in India per person is like 80 to 1 or even higher. China similar. In the U.S. it's much lower. It's a cancer doctor they're probably 20 or 30, but so it's a much higher ratio. So the challenge in healthcare is, how do you get, you're not going to displace the doctor. The doctors are a vital part of this, but how do you get the knowledge, the best knowledge of what's out there across a much broader scale? So those are the kinds of things that we see AI improving, but it's definitely not a replace a person. It's always a person with a machine working together, whether that's in healthcare, whether that's in financial services, whether that's in just basic kind of management and insights and handling clients. It's a person and machine combination, but jobs will change. And this group, you'll see a ton of it, but you'll also lead a ton of it, because you'll find, as you understand the technologies, you'll find new uses all the time in how you might accomplish that person and machine kind of approach.
So IBM reached a major milestone recently with the close of the acquisition of Red Hat. And not only was that the biggest acquisition in IBM's history, but it's also one of the biggest technology acquisitions of all time. Can you talk about the thought process going into such a consequential decision like that, and how you gained sort of consensus internally?
Yeah, so we had been thinking about Red Hat as a partner, and we have partnered with Red Hat for a long time. What we were hearing from our clients, though, in the cloud world, so let's take a step back for a second and think about what clients are faced with in this not so new world of cloud anymore. Cloud world's been out for more than 15 years now. What clients had started to shift some workloads, mostly new things, into a cloud environment. But those environments were highly proprietary, and what they were worried about, what our clients were worried about, is, well, look, if I move anything that's sort of mission critical, I'm going to be locked into this ecosystem, and then I'm kind of done. I have no more choices, and I'm not looking to go from what I consider today to be an open innovation environment to maybe a proprietary system. So they were asking for our help. They were asking us to help them navigate this world. At the same time, they're trying to build their own innovation skills. They're trying to build their own things, which tends to mean open as opposed to proprietary. So when we stepped back and thought about, well, what's going to allow them the confidence to build and move into a cloud world, whether it's hybrid, whether it's their own private cloud or into a public cloud, they need confidence that they're not going to get locked in, and that's what Red Hat provides. Now, we could do that combined with Red Hat as a partner. We didn't have to own them, but our view is that when we do that, if we make OpenShift, for instance, the containerization platform of the world, and RHEL the standard, which is now the biggest even in the cloud world, if we do that, all that value is going to accrue to the Red Hat shareholders, and I'm not so sure that the IBM shareholders are kind of signing up to make them rich. So intellectually, you can partner to kind of and bring that world to your clients, but you got to be able to look your shareholders in the eye and say, and you're going to get the benefit. So we viewed the price when we look at our assumptions. We viewed the price as a very fair price, given it's the dominant operating system now in both the data center, private data centers as well as in the cloud. And OpenShift is with the acceptance now that containerization is sort of the next wave, and that we got quite a few years ahead of us. OpenShift as the premier platform to help allow things to run anywhere and really address this issue of lockup. We viewed it as almost like a bargain. Remember, they make money, right? They're profitable. Not a lot of tech companies make money. They're profitable and great cash flow. So the combination of the two was, I'd say, obvious, and getting the teams excited about it was not difficult. Now, the challenge that we envision, and the one that we're making sure that everyone understands, is that Red Hat's still operating as Red Hat, and obviously we're still operating as IBM. And we've shorthanded that to there is no purple. There's a blue and there's a red. We're not making any purple. We need Red Hat to play the role of that Switzerland, if you will, of the operating system world. So everything we've done is to assure our clients that it remains open. Everything we've done is to assure our clients that the innovation that they see is available on all these different clouds. Red Hat's big partners with Microsoft, and that continues, even though we're not. Red Hat's big partners with Amazon, even though we're obviously not. Now, that may sound a little bit difficult, but it's actually not as hard as you think, because we've been an industry of co-opetition for decades. It's the way it's sort of always worked. So even though Microsoft is a competitor, we're actually one of the biggest implementers of Microsoft software because we have a big services business. Oracle's a competitor. We're one of the biggest implementers of Oracle software because we have a services business. So we're used to sort of navigating this co-opetition market. And I'm confident that we can keep Red Hat independent. We can confident we can get people comfortable that Red Hat's open source nature will continue, and all of that great innovation will be everywhere, so that you can go find it wherever it is. Obviously, I'm confident that the cultures then will be able to sort of coexist, and our shareholders can get the benefit of all that. I have a longer answer too, if you wanted it.
I'm watching the clock nervously. No, thank you. I'd like to switch gears here again and kind of talk about your advice for us. And I think even as students, we can all appreciate how much learning actually happens outside of the classroom. And with that in mind, if you could come back and teach a course or a seminar based on what you've learned outside the classroom, what would it be and why?
Wow. Look, I think there are so many experts in sort of the things you learn here as kind of a basis, which are really important, and they serve as a really, really, really good foundation. I think what I've come to appreciate more and more are the nuances of leadership, the nuances of building teams, the nuances of communication at lots of different scales. So I would first and foremost focus on communication as a strategic leg in the stool of a career, because I think it's just so critical, particularly as you move higher and higher. Second thing second topic, it's a little bit related, but and it's a little bit more nuanced. What is so important in a big organization? So we have 350,000 people in IBM, and the reason 350,000 people can accomplish so much is because there's a hydraulic fluid in an organization called trust. And so how you build trust, how you build others build trust in you, and how you enable a team to build trust so that 10 people can lift a lot more than what 10 people can lift, is such a big part of not only what makes an organization successful, but it's what makes the leadership, the individuals in the leadership successful. So communication, vital, one leg of the stool. Second leg of the stool would be around building trust. And then third leg of the stool, I think, is really sort of the evolution of leadership from a relationship standpoint? How do you build not I won't say trusted relationships again, but how do you build followership and interact with people in a positive way so that not that doesn't mean just how do you always deliver good news. It's really about how do you build followership and build a team that can enable you to be successful because the team is successful. What happens in when you're starting your career, you're very much about how do I make my boss look good, right? My success is tied to my boss's success, and that goes on for a little while. What eventually becomes, though, is the only way I'm successful is if my team is successful. So in many ways, I kind of work for my team now in that if they don't make it, I'm not going to get there, right? There's no direct report of mine. We split the world up into 7 regions. There's no direct report of mine that if they're not successful, I can get over the line. I just can't, right? So this idea of how you lead and how you build followership is such a critical part. So communication, leadership, and trust.
That's great. I have one more question before I open it up to Q&A from the audience. But many of us, especially in the master's program here, will be leaving the Tepper school and taking on leadership roles, oftentimes for the first time. Is there any mistakes or that you kind of see in your position that you see leaders make?
You were worried
more
about
often?
the time in the last question?
Is there maybe one mistake that you see leaders commit more often?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't call it a mistake. Look, I think success when I left Carnegie Mellon was very much in the beginning about my ability to answer the question. That was what my success was. If I could answer the questions, I'd be successful. And again, that kind of runs out. And what you learn when you get into a leadership role is that it's not your ability to answer the questions, it's your ability to ask the questions that matter. So you sort of have to switch your headset around from I have to know everything about everything to no, I have to help get to an answer with a group. Now, fortunately, my experience, and I asked the team here today, Carnegie Mellon works in these really team-oriented ways, which is reality, right? So few of us have ever. I know the ways of working are changing all the time, but even a long time ago when I left, even almost 30 years ago, it was still a group effort. And when I joined IBM, it's a group effort, right? IBM is a team-based organization. So what you learn very quickly is from your ability to answer questions on that team goes to your ability to question the team so you can get to the right spot. It's learnable. I think it's learnable with what we talked about before, which is prepare and practice. But it is very much a learnable skill. It relies a lot on on 2 things. One, the basis that you're going to get here, the analytical basis, the intellectual, and sort of the curriculum you get here is a really good starting point for that. And relatedly, it's this continuous learning. Those are both really, really important. The second thing that's really important that I've had to develop over the years, and I'll explain it because I don't want it to sound like voodoo, is you really have to develop your intuition. Now, that doesn't mean like predicting where a dart's going to land. Now, that's not the kind of intuition I'm talking about. But each of us has an intuitive approach to problem solving. And each of us needs to find a culture that has a consistent, intuitive approach to problem solving. So for me and IBM is a very data-based organization. That's intuitive to me. Use some data, not every bit of data you can find, but use some data to lead an answer. So you need to find an organization and a culture that has an intuitive approach to problem solving, number one. And number two, you need to develop that. You need to develop your intuitive approach to problem solving because what happens as you move through an organization, the scale at which you need to operate and the pace at which you need to operate means you're going to have to trust yourself. Not that you know the answer, but you know how to get to the answer. And if you don't have that intuitive approach to problem solving, you're going to belabor this. You're not going to be decisive. Your teams are going to be like, what the hell? I mean, what are we doing here? So the way to develop that intuitive approach to problem solving starts on day one of your job by actively participating in group discussions around things. I will guarantee that a person who listens to others participate and sort of self-judges and says, oh, that's a good question, I wouldn't have asked that. A person who keeps all that inside will not evolve their intuitive approach to problem solving. You have to do it by making yourself a bit vulnerable. You have to do it by saying, hey, have we thought about this? Or hey, I think it's this. Or how about if we try this and modify it? And if you don't develop that intuitive approach to problem solving, then you will find you're too belabored in order to make decisions quickly. And I can't emphasize enough that, particularly, in this job, in my CFO job, I didn't know the answers, but I was, and people would always say, like, how did you prepare for the analyst call? Well, the first thing is I already knew my answers. It didn't matter what their questions were, but the reason I knew my answers was because I had an intuitive sense, an intuitive approach to figuring out how am I going to collect after this 90-day period. How am I going to collect what are really important to our investors? Obviously, you can't tell them what you're going to tell everybody, and then how do I get the team harmonized around building that story? So it's not as daunting, it's not as hard, a process as you think if you're comfortable with how you approach a problem. And that is, how do you develop your intuitive sense? And you have to be a participant. You cannot just sit and take notes and sort of, judge the dives as they come in. You actually have to do it. And I tell this to all my kids who are working, like, you got to get into this. You have to make yourself vulnerable. That's the hard part.
Wow, excellent. So I think we have time for maybe one, maybe two questions. Does anybody have anything they'd like to ask? Yeah, right over here.
So the question for you would be, you listed out some of the things that you told us would help someone succeed. When you're recruiting for your team, what do you need to do to kind of find that?
Yeah, so it's an interesting, because I'll talk about IBM in broadly, right? Because we have to do this at scale, right? We have 350,000 people. Turnover, attrition, performance, whatever you want to call it, we wind up hiring 65,000 people a year. And as I said earlier, obviously skills are an important part of that, but what's becoming much, much more important, and you can test for this, we do this now, is propensity to learn. Because the skills that we need today are probably going to become a little bit stale within a few years. And we want people to stay for a long time, right? We want people to build a career there. And IBM is the kind of place where there's so much going on. You can find lots of different things to do to keep your brain engaged. So we are now, first and foremost, we are sort of testing, and we're evolving how we do it, but we're testing for propensity to learn. Those are the people who are certainly going to be most successful in IBM. But when I talk to my peers, when I talk to others, same thing. They're trying to figure out how do I develop an organization with a high propensity to learn, so that I can keep my organization moving forward. Again, we're lucky in some ways. We're lucky because we're in a very fast-moving organization industry, and so if we're going to keep up with the world, we have to do this. It's an imperative for us. There are some industries that move a little bit slower, and without that burning platform, it's a little bit harder. But for us, it's number one, propensity to learn. So that's the organization in total. When I look at my team, so just the way we're organized. So we're in 100 and whatever I said, 72 countries. We split the world up into 7 regions, and the person who runs North America, the person who runs Europe, Japan, the other 4, they work for me. That's my direct report team. And then I have a CMO, a Chief Marketing Officer. I have a CCO, Chief Communications Officer as well. Those leadership positions are in those leadership positions. I look for the people who are sort of complementary to my skills, because what is really hard for people to do is to hire better than themselves. That's easy for me because almost everybody is better than I am. But I'm looking for people who have diverse backgrounds, different backgrounds from mine. I'm looking for people who have different team compositions than what I do, who put their teams together in different ways from what I do, because that diversity of thought is so important for the enterprise as a total. And it also says a lot about how those teams are going to operate effectively. So we collectively cannot underestimate the importance of diversity at the leadership level and all the way through an organization in order to get to the best answer. And then, as I said, at the basic, kind of at the skills level, it's this propensity to learn that's so vital for people, and more so now than ever. And in 5 years, it'll be even more so again.
We have one more. Yeah.
I'd like to ask a follow-up question, because you talked a lot about learning. So I wonder, what would your advice for our MBA students to balance between the high-level view and their technical details?
Yeah, so, I mean, fortunately, as an ex-CFO, I didn't have to do follow-up questions. So this is sort of new for me. Because we could cut the mic off. It was really handy. No. So look, I think there are, and I mentioned this a little bit before. So my learning, I've sort of split. I've kind of bifurcated, right? There's always an opportunity for us to become better leaders. The leadership that I need to evolve is much different from what I had to learn 20 years ago when I started, kind of developing myself as a leader. And then on the technical side, the world is more technical, right? And so understanding kind of the I don't mean physics in the science sense, but understanding the physics of business, either the one you're in or the one that you're serving, really important. So there's a deep technical component that I think is really important that you need to understand. And that's true not only in a science sense, but when you're the treasurer, as an example, which I was for 4 years during the financial crisis, you really need to understand the depth of the market. Not that you don't have like 5 interest rate swap traders who are much deeper than you. Not to say that you don't have an FX swap trader who's much deeper than you, but you need to understand sort of the componentry of what they're doing so you can actually be helpful to them. Even the most technical teams need leadership to understand what they're doing so they can sort of set a direction or keep you away from things. So I still bifurcate my education between leadership and technical. Now, on the technical side, the issues have become bigger and bigger for me because I play a different role. So as an example, we IBM and me primarily within IBM have taken a very strong stance on the importance of digital trade. So I've spent a lot of time with trade ministers around the world. I spent a lot of time engaging on what does good look like. I spent a lot of time on helping them get the right structure around it. So you need to go deep not only on the technicals of trade, but you need to go really deep to convince others on why they need to do something, right? This job, particularly when it comes to governments, there's no power. It's all influence, right? I don't have any power over the government, but I can influence them. And so you need to get really deep on things. The government tends to be full of some, particularly those who are writing the legislation and the staffs are really smart people who know their stuff. You need to be a lot deeper than them on why some of these things are important. So there's, again, a leadership piece to this. There's a technical piece, but as you move through your career, there's sort of these issues that are bigger than the enterprise, right? They're so important to everybody, but they're important to the enterprise. So you need to take a leadership position on them, and you need to have a statement. You need to have a way to think about it that can help influence others. And it is hard to, it's hard to influence governments. It's hard to influence clients because the agendas aren't like always perfectly. If agendas were perfectly aligned, it would probably go pretty easy. But agendas tend to be a little bit askew at times. And so you need to constantly stay, again, as you go through your career, you need to constantly stay as not only the person who can communicate well, but you need to be in many ways the subject matter expert on these issues that are much bigger than the enterprise. And I've really enjoyed, I picked up this digital trade, and we could see it evolving, and we knew it wasn't really getting anywhere in a material way. And so I said, look, I'm gonna form an opinion. I'm gonna put out. I've written op-eds. I've done interviews on it. As I said, I've met with 40 different trade ministers around the world. We have a voice at the table, and we need to make sure that we put forward our voice to influence this. Otherwise, this could go really poorly, and all of that requires this sort of constant education, a desire to learn about how the world might work. So, and good thing, I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons I like IBM. One of the reasons I like IBM is because we do get a seat at the table, right? When every country I go to, I can get a seat with, the trade minister. I can sit down with cabinet. Spend a lot of time in Washington. These are really, and I said this in a prior session, if you measure quality of life by the kind of problems you fill up your brain with, then this is very high quality of life. You don't get to sleep a lot, but it's very high quality of life.
In some ways, it's a good thing. Thank you so much for being with us here today, Martin. I'd like to invite up the dean here to give you a special gift.
Oh.
Hi, I'm Alan Scheller-Wolf. I'm the Senior Associate Dean of Faculty and Research. Dean Damon can't be here. He's at another meeting. So it's my actual great pleasure to thank you for coming. It's always, these talks are always great, independent of who's coming generally, because it's great to hear what people have learned and about leadership and how they can go on. It's doubly great when it's one of our own coming back and sharing how they've taken what they've learned here and made not just a great career, but a great life for themselves. So sincerely want to thank you for coming back. Let's give a hand. And we have our Tepper award that I...
Can I just say one thing? Yes, thank you. I will say one thing. I met with a smaller group earlier, and I made the point to them as well. You should be really excited about the future for many, many reasons, because obviously, you're going to have a lot of opportunities. I promise I'm not going to drop this. I know it looks like I'm going to drop it. Oh, no. You have a lot of opportunities ahead of you, but I will say that you should be excited for lots of reasons, including, it's always been my experience, the Carnegie Mellon brand travels so well everywhere in the world, everywhere in the world. And as I said to the prior audience, everyone's going to get a reputation, right? In the firm you're in, you're going to get a reputation. You're a deal maker. You're a fixer of things. The start of that reputation is going to be when they look at your credentialing. And while skills are really important, credentialing helps people form an opinion about you. And when you say you went to Carnegie Mellon, boy, you will get the reputation of pretty smart. I mean, like really stinking smart. This is one of the schools. There aren't a ton. There are, I don't know, maybe a dozen in the world that travel as well as Carnegie Mellon does from an intellectual, from a brain power capacity. That's been my experience. It's helped me quite a bit in my career. So I think you should be excited about being here. The building is phenomenal, by the way. I was telling the other team that when I was here, not 1892, thank you, my program training class was in a trailer. Not that there was anything wrong with the trailer, but it's not this. So you should be excited about the spot. It's phenomenal, but you should be really excited about being able to have that Carnegie Mellon diploma. It is absolutely worth it. It travels well, and it will help start to build that reputation of being kind of a big brain problem solver. So, and that's all any of us can hope for in a career. Is like, can I really put some interesting problems in my brain to work on? So, well done to you. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Well done.